After I pretended to inherit a fortune, my mom suddenly loved me again, until she found out the truth and told me, "You're nothing but a manipulative liar." When I asked if any of it was ever real, she laughed and said, "Of course not." I walked away. That was 1 year ago. Yesterday, she called my brother, begging to talk to me. I convinced my family I inherited a fortune just to see how they'd react. Growing up, I was always the family scapegoat. My older sister was the golden child, a skinny and conventionally attractive girl who could do no wrong. My younger brother was the baby of the family, a boy with extremely mild ADHD, who wasn't expected to take accountability for anything. As for me, they loved me for what I was, not who I was. You see, I was the one they called when they needed help moving, when their car broke down, or when they needed a shoulder to cry on. But when it came to my life, they couldn't care less. When I turned 10 and realized it was the 10th year in a row that no one remembered to celebrate my birthday, I started my own tradition of buying a cupcake and blowing out an unlit candle by myself. I'm literally nowhere to be found in the family photo albums, and my siblings were constantly stealing money from my piggy bank. Fast forward to when I was 16, and I had endured 16 years of full-blown emotional neglect. My grandfather on my late dad's side had passed away. Before he died, I was literally the only one who'd visit him on his farm and even bother to take care of him. So I had a light bulb moment. We were all sitting together at the kitchen table when I announced it. "Guys, Granddad Harold died." My mom just shrugged her shoulders, and my siblings just ignored me. "Yeah, so in his will he left me everything. A pretty crazy amount of money, to be honest. I still can't believe it." Their reactions were instant. My sister's eyes widened with envy. My brother almost choked on his drink. And my mom, who treated me like I was a carrier of the Black Plague disease, grabbed my hand and said how proud she was of me. It was surreal, almost laughable, so much so that I didn't take it back. I needed to see how long I could keep it up. Suddenly, I was invited to every event. My siblings, who usually ignored me, started calling to ask about my day. My mom would text me heart emojis out of the blue, but I just kept playing the part. I blew my savings on renting a flashy green Lambo for the week, and even staged a trip to Europe by taking photos at a fancy local hotel and faking the Instagram location. That's when my phone started buzzing faster than a girl's toy in a long-distance relationship. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention. It was intoxicating. For a brief moment, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, they had changed. but the requests started to pile up. My sister wanted a loan to redo her kitchen. My mom asked for help with medical bills. For a while, I managed to successfully dodge their questions by saying the estate hadn't settled yet. I promised to see what I could do. I started to panic. I didn't have $10 to spare, let alone 10,000. Desperate to keep the lie going, I maxed out my credit cards and took out a personal loan. I started dodging phone calls when the debt collectors got aggressive. I needed them to love me just a little bit longer. But then came the final straw. My mom, suspicious after I kept delaying payments, called our cousin who worked in probate law. When she found out there was no inheritance, no will, nothing at all, she confronted me at Sunday dinner. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Tears began to stream down my face. I could practically feel their love slipping away like sand in my fingers. The silence was suffocating. My brother shook his head, muttering about how I was always a screw-up. My sister called me a manipulative liar. I never realized you were this pathetic, my mom whispered, like she was talking to a stranger. I sheepishly retreated to my room, not wanting to face the disappointment of the people I loved most. That's when, once again, my phone started blowing up. But this time, it was with hate. I was getting calls from distant relatives who heard the story, calling me disgusting for faking wealth. My siblings even posted online about how I'd betrayed the family. I couldn't believe how quickly the affection had vanished. I had to sell almost everything I owned just to get out of debt. And after I graduated, I moved into Granddad's Harold's farm to work full-time. But there was one silver lining. I didn't have to pretend anymore. And turns out, Harold was willing to accept me just as I was. I wasn't wealthy, but I was free, or so I thought. Because there was one thing I didn't account for. By moving out, I wasn't the scapegoat anymore, and the role needed to be replaced. That person became my older sister, except she hadn't been trained her whole life, so she couldn't handle it like I did. So that's when I got the call from my brother. She had ended her own life. I remember exactly where I was when I got that call, standing in Harold's old barn, fixing a tractor that hadn't run right in years. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I almost didn't answer it. My brother Ethan hadn't called me in months. Not since the whole inheritance fiasco blew up. I wiped my greasy hands on my jeans and picked up. His voice sounded hollow, empty. He just said it straight out. Melissa was gone. Took a bunch of pills. Mom found her. I dropped the wrench I was holding, and it hit the concrete floor with a clang that echoed through the empty barn. I couldn't process what he was saying. My sister, who'd always been the perfect one, the golden child, was dead because of what I did. I drove to my mom's house in a daze. The old pickup truck Harold left me sputtered and coughed the whole way there. I kept thinking about Melissa, about how we used to be close when we were really little, before Mom started playing favorites, about how she'd slowly turned colder toward me as we grew up. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a minute. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left 6 months ago. Same peeling paint, same cracked walkway. I finally got out and walked to the door. I didn't know if I should knock or just walk in. I used to live here, but now I felt like a stranger. I knocked. Ethan opened the door. His eyes were red and puffy. He didn't hug me or even say hello. He just turned and walked back inside. I followed him into the living room where my mom sat on the couch, staring at nothing. When she saw me, her face hardened. She didn't even let me sit down before she started. According to her, this was all my fault. My lie about the inheritance had started everything. When I left, the family dynamics shifted. Mom needed someone new to blame for everything, and Melissa became the target. Nothing she did was good enough anymore. Her job wasn't prestigious enough. Her boyfriend wasn't ambitious enough. Her clothes weren't stylish enough. I stood there taking it all in. My mom's words hit me like physical blows. Ethan just sat there, not defending me, not saying anything. I wanted to argue, to point out that Mom was the one who created this toxic environment in the first place. But what was the point? Melissa was gone. Nothing would bring her back. The funeral was 3 days later, a small, sad affair at the local church. I sat in the back row, away from my mom and Ethan. A few of Melissa's friends from high school showed up. Her boyfriend Tyler was there, looking shell-shocked. I didn't approach any of them. What would I even say? After the service, I went back to the farm alone. I sat on Harold's old porch swing and cried for the first time since I got the news. I cried for Melissa, for the relationship we never had. I cried for myself and the years of neglect I'd endured. I cried for my broken family that would never be whole again. The next morning, I woke up to pounding on my door. It was Tyler, Melissa's boyfriend. His eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in days. He pushed past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. He paced around my living room, running his hands through his hair. Tyler told me Melissa had left him a letter. In it, she explained everything. How Mom had turned on her after I left. How she couldn't handle the constant criticism and emotional abuse. How she missed the way things used to be when she was the favorite. The letter also mentioned something else. A diary Melissa had kept for years. Tyler had found it hidden in their apartment. He'd read enough to know it contained secrets about our family that Melissa had been keeping. He brought it with him, tossed it on my coffee table, a plain black notebook with my sister's name written on the cover in silver marker. I didn't want to read it. It felt like invading her privacy, but Tyler insisted. He said there were things in there I needed to know, things about Mom, about our family history, things that might explain why she treated us the way she did. I made coffee while Tyler crashed on my couch, emotionally exhausted. When he fell asleep, I picked up the diary and started reading. The first entries were from when Melissa was 13, typical teenage stuff. But as I flipped through the pages, I found entries about me, about how Mom would tell her to stay away from me, that I was just like your father. That confused me. Our dad had died when I was a baby. I barely remembered him. Mom rarely talked about him. I kept reading, and the pieces started falling into place. According to Melissa's diary, our dad hadn't just died. He'd left Mom for another woman when I was an infant. Apparently I looked just like him, and every time Mom looked at me, she saw the man who had abandoned her. That's why she couldn't love me properly. That's why I became the scapegoat. But there was more, much more. Melissa wrote about overhearing arguments between Mom and Harold, my grandfather, about money that was supposed to be for all of us kids, about promises that were broken, about secrets that were kept. The last entry was dated just 2 days before she died. She wrote about feeling trapped, about not knowing how to escape Mom's criticism, about how she finally understood what I had gone through all those years. And at the very end, a single line, I found the real Will. Everything changes now. The real Will? What did that mean? I closed the diary and looked over at Tyler, still passed out on my couch. What had Melissa discovered? And why did she think it would change everything? I needed answers. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the box of Harold's personal effects I'd kept after he died. Old photos, his reading glasses, a pocket watch, nothing that looked like a will. I emptied the box completely, checking every item. That's when I noticed the lining of the box seemed loose. I pulled at it, and it came away easily. Underneath was a folded document. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was indeed a will, dated just a month before Harold died, and it left everything. The farm, his savings, everything, to be divided equally among his grandchildren, me, Melissa, and Ethan. But that's not what happened. The farm came to me only because no one else wanted it. There had been no money, no savings to speak of, or so I thought. The will mentioned an account at First National Bank, an account I knew nothing about. Had Mom known? Had she somehow accessed this money and kept it from us? Is that what Melissa discovered? I needed to find out the truth. For Melissa. For myself. I carefully folded the will and put it in my pocket. Tyler was still sleeping, so I left him a note saying I'd be back soon. I got in my truck and headed toward town, toward the bank, toward answers that might finally explain the dysfunction that had defined my family for as long as I could remember. First, National Bank was a small brick building on Main Street. I'd passed it 1,000 times, but never had a reason to go inside. My palms were sweaty as I pushed through the glass doors. The cool air conditioning hit me, along with the smell of paper and cleaning products. I approached the first available teller, a middle-aged woman with a name tag that read, Patricia. I explained that my grandfather had recently passed away, and I'd found documentation of an account in his name. She asked for ID and the account information from the will. Patricia's eyes widened slightly as she looked at her computer screen. She excused herself and disappeared into a back office. 5 minutes later, she returned with a man in a suit who introduced himself as Roger, the bank manager. He invited me into his office, and my heart started racing. Something was definitely up. Roger closed the door behind us and sat behind his desk. He folded his hands and looked at me with a serious expression. The account existed all right. It was a trust fund Harold had set up years ago for his grandchildren. According to Roger, there had been regular withdrawals from the account over the past 10 years. Large withdrawals. I felt sick to my stomach. The money was supposed to be for us kids, for our education, our futures, but someone had been taking it, and I had a pretty good idea who. Roger showed me the paperwork. Mom had been named as the trustee, responsible for managing the money until we turned 25. She had complete access. I asked how much was originally in the account. Roger hesitated, then told me, $500,000. My grandfather had sold some land before he died and put all the money away for us. Now there was less than 50,000 left. I thanked Roger, got copies of all the transactions, and left the bank in a daze. I sat in my truck, staring at the papers. Mom had been stealing from us for years, using our inheritance to fund her lifestyle. No wonder she could afford that new car last year. No wonder she always had the latest iPhone. It was all making sense now. I drove straight to my mom's house. I needed to confront her. I needed to know why. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. I parked haphazardly in the driveway and stormed up to the door. I didn't knock this time. I just walked in. Mom was in the kitchen, making a sandwich. She looked up, surprised to see me. Before she could say anything, I slapped the bank statements down on the counter. Her face went pale. She knew exactly what they were. I asked her how she could do this to us, how she could steal our future. She started crying, saying she needed the money, that raising 3 kids alone was expensive. I reminded her that the money wasn't for her. It was for us, for our college funds, for our first homes, for our futures. She got defensive then, saying I didn't understand how hard it had been for her, how my father had left her with nothing, how she deserved some happiness. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was justifying stealing from her own children. That's when Ethan walked in. He'd been upstairs and heard us arguing. He looked confused, so I handed him the bank statements. He read them slowly, his expression changing from confusion to shock to anger. He looked at Mom like he was seeing her for the first time. Mom tried to turn Ethan against me, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing, that she had used the money for our benefit. But the statements didn't lie. Designer clothes, spa retreats, a timeshare in Florida. None of that was for us. Ethan surprised me then. For the first time in our lives, he took my side. He told Mom he couldn't believe she'd do something like this, especially after what happened to Melissa. Mom's face hardened. She told us both to get out of her house, that we were ungrateful, just like our father. We left, Ethan following me in his car back to the farm. We sat on Harold's porch and talked for hours. Really talked, for the first time since we were kids. Ethan admitted he'd always been jealous of me, of how capable I was, how I didn't need anyone's help. He thought I was Mom's favorite because she never criticized me the way she did him. I laughed at that, a bitter, hollow laugh. I told him about the birthdays, about the piggy bank, about all the years of being invisible. He seemed genuinely shocked. We'd been living in the same house, but experiencing completely different childhoods. Tyler woke up while we were talking. He joined us on the porch, and I filled him in on what we'd discovered. He wasn't surprised. Apparently, Melissa had suspected something like this for months. She'd confronted Mom about it the day before she died. That hit me like a truck. Had that confrontation pushed Melissa over the edge? Had Mom said something to her? Something so horrible that Melissa couldn't take it anymore? I needed to know what happened that day. The 3 of us decided to go back to Melissa and Tyler's apartment. Tyler thought there might be more information there, something that could tell us what happened in those final days. The apartment was small, but neat. Melissa had always been organized. We started searching, looking through her desk, her files, her computer. Tyler knew her passwords, so we checked her emails and social media messages. Nothing seemed unusual until we found a hidden folder on her laptop, labeled simply M. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them. Text conversations between Melissa and Mom from the last few months. As I scrolled through them, my blood ran cold. Mom had been gaslighting Melissa, telling her she was worthless, that she was a disappointment, that she would never amount to anything. The same things she'd said to me for years. But there was worse. In the last conversation, dated the day before Melissa died, Mom had told her that Dad hadn't just left, he'd unalived himself, and that Melissa was heading down the same path, that she was weak, just like him. I felt physically sick. Ethan had to rush